Joining me now with more is Anthony Pompliano. He's a founder and CEO of Professional at Capital Management. Anthony, great to have you on the show this morning on NYSE TV Live as we await Saturday Night Live on that podium. But we are watching stocks trade fractionally lower just before the bell. How do you think investors should interpret the latest news out of the White House, including on tariffs?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. When it comes to tariffs, I think that there's a lot of folks who, frankly, got taught something in their economics 101 class, and they never double-checked the work. And so what I mean by that is if you go back to 2018, the tariffs that were implemented both on solar panels, we saw steel, and also on washing machines, pretty much everything we had been told about tariffs turned out not to be true. And what I mean by that is we saw that prices were lower of all three of those goods by the end of 2019, so about 18 months later, we actually had lower prices. We saw American manufacturing, both in terms of production level, but also job creation, increase. And on top of that, the government was able to pull in more revenue. And so what I think happened was in 2018, there was a little bit of a tariff experiment that played out. And now what we're getting is a tariff era. And I fully expect there to be many, many more tariffs that are announced and implemented. And so investors are going to have kind of short-term gyrations in the market, but over the long run, it ends up being very good for both the American stock market, but also for the American economy.
That does seem to be the growing expectation. And just to break down some of the numbers here, 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel. That comes after spending cuts over the weekend, including on penny production. What does this say about the landscape under this new administration?
Well, I think that you're getting a lot of common sense stuff, right? You're bringing business people in to the government, and they're used to looking at things and making gut calls on whether something makes sense or not. And so the pennies is a perfect example. We are spending about 3 cents to make a penny that only has a face value of 1 cent. If you spend, 3 times more than the face value of something, you probably should stop doing it. And so we're not necessarily pulling the penny out of circulation. Instead, we're just saying we're not going to produce more of them. And I think that, when people look at that, they say, oh, we're only going to save about $500 million a year or so off of that. But every time that, whether it's Doge or the current administration announces something, people kind of dismiss it as it's only $100 million, it's only $500 million, it's only $1 billion. But these things add up. And if you look at just over the last 48 hours, I can count almost $2 billion worth of savings that has been announced, whether it's through the penny production, Doge, expense cuts or other things. And so I do think that this administration is very focused on trying to balance a budget, and we're going to see if they can do it or not.
What else should we expect, or are you anticipating, Anthony, through the end of the first quarter, of course, ending at the end of March?
Yeah, I think that this administration really is focused on 3 things. The first is they want to balance the budget. The second is that they want to go and put people in positions of power and influence within their administration that are going to look at things, whether it's considered different or the same, that really are just results driven. So you can see, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this morning, he's working out with the troops. I don't think that we could have ever thought we'd see a Secretary of Defense doing something like that. And so it's just a different mentality of the people that they're putting in here. And the last thing is, obviously I spent a lot of time on the crypto industry, and I think that there is now widespread bipartisan support to drive some sort of framework that allows for this stuff to operate legally within the United States. And Bitcoin has been a big winner from Trump getting elected, but I also think that stable coins and many other areas within the industry are going to be beneficiaries as well.
Yeah, it looks like Bitcoin at about $96,000 a token. Anthony, we've had several guests on the show, including actually Anthony Scaramucci recently, saying he expects a doubling of Bitcoin this year to 200,000 by year end. Do you agree with that?
I don't know where the price is going to go. I think the single most important thing for Bitcoin's price, though, is whether the United States is going to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve or not. If the United States decides that they're going to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet and they're going to start buying more of it, that will be kind of a green light for the rest of the world to start doing the same thing. And we know that there are some smaller countries that have been doing this. You have El Salvador, Bhutan, etc. But there's also some very large countries that have been doing this quietly. But once the United States goes ahead and does this, then it will give kind of everyone career cover, right? If you're doing it and the United States isn't doing it, the U.S. may be knocking on your door saying, hey, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? But the second that you're simply just following the United States, I think that there's going to be an explosion of interest. And the interesting thing about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is the only asset I'm aware of, as the price goes up, it becomes less risky. It was really individuals that were buying this first. Now with countries and those large pools of capital, the price has gotten to a point where it's large enough, and now they're becoming interested, which is a pretty interesting kind of trend to keep an eye on.
We are going to hear from the Fed Chair, Jerome Powell. He is testifying in front of Congress today and tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time for both. These are routine testimonies, but likely he will get the question on tariffs and how that might impact Fed policy. What do you expect to hear from the Fed Chair?
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to say. I do think that, again, if you go back and you look at what happened in 2018, we don't need to study academic, literature in terms of what they think is going to happen. We know what happened. And so monetary policy is one of these complex things where the more humans intervene, the more we mess things up. And you can look at 2020 until today to kind of see how many errors we've made. So I don't envy the Fed chairman or his colleagues in terms of what they've got to do. But I do think that the tariffs and other things that are going to come out of the administration are going to make their job harder, because sometimes it's unpredictable. Sometimes it is done not through the lens of monetary policy and its impact on the economy. And so we're going to see what he says. But ultimately, I think that the administration is not really going to pay attention that much. They're going to do what they want to do.
We, of course, will be waiting from those comments from the Fed Chair, Anthony. We've got the consumer price index data out tomorrow, and then we've got wholesale prices on Thursday as well. So a lot to cover here on our show. We appreciate you joining. Again, that is Anthony Pompliano. He's a founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management.